The afternoon sun draped across Lakeview Estates, casting long shadows over manicured lawns and identical pastel houses. Our neighborhood was the epitome of suburban conformity, where every blade of grass seemed to march in military precision. It was a place where the homeowners association held court, ruling with an iron fist wrapped in grandiose courtesy. I had never been one to ruffle feathers. My little corner lot was my sanctuary, my refuge from the world's chaos. The fence around my backyard, a modest, weathered structure, stood like an old friend, embracing my wild garden with its blooms of defiant color. It was my small rebellion against the monotony, a tangle of life in a sea of uniformity. And then came the letter. A crisp, white envelope slipped through my mail slot, as clinical and impersonal as the words inside. The HOA, personified in our neighborhood by Karen Langley, had decreed my fence an eyesore, a blemish on their perfect tableau. My thoughts bubbled like a pot of simmering stew. I could almost hear Karen's clipped tone, sharp as a freshly sharpened head shear, declaring my humble fence unworthy. I knew Karen well. Her icy blue eyes seemed to pierce through trivialities, zeroing in on any deviation from her meticulously crafted standards. She moved through the streets like a monarch, her presence announced by the click of her designer heels on cement. The power she wielded was both awe-inspiring and absurd, a self-anointed queen in a kingdom of vinyl siding and asphalt. A lesser person might have succumbed to her demands, painting their world beige to blend into the background. But not I. Instead, I chose tranquility, a quiet rebellion simmering beneath a calm surface. My mind wandered to the countless infractions I had witnessed, each one logged meticulously in my mental ledger. The irony was almost palpable. Weekends spent pruning and planting became my canvas. I painted not with brushes, but with whispers of defiance. The edges of my fence soon bore the stories of countless violations, each transgression recorded not in ink, but in vibrant hues. The neighbor who always parked their RV on the curb, the Christmas lights left twinkling well into March, each was immortalized in a streak of color. It was a symphony of rule-breaking, orchestrated in vivid tones. And with each brushstroke, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, replaced by a quiet resolve. I could sense the neighborhood's eyes upon me, some curious, others aghast. But I was no longer a silent observer. I was an author, writing my own narrative across the weathered wood. Karen's first visit came as no surprise. Her presence loomed at the edge of my yard, her gaze tracing the vibrant rebellion with the precision of a hawk surveying its prey. Her lips pursed, a thin line of disapproval etched into her porcelain features. I met her gaze, a silent exchange of wills. Her silence was a storm on the horizon, promising thunder and rain. Yet, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fire, I found comfort in my creation. In a world where conformity held sway, my fence stood as a testament to individuality. For every rule broken, there was a story told, a truth revealed, and I smiled, a quiet acknowledgement of the irony that danced in the air. Lakeview Estates would never be the same. The sun rose with a biting chill that morning, casting long shadows across our little suburban battlefield. My fence stood there, bold and defiant, now a canvas of transgressions, a quiet rebellion against the self-appointed neighborhood overseers. In the golden light, every rule they'd ever broken glistened like dew on the grass, a public record painted with careful strokes. Each line was a whispered secret, now shouted from the rooftops. I sipped my coffee, the steam curling like a sigh in the crisp air as I watched the usual parade commence. Dogs pulled their owners along the winding sidewalks. Children's backpacks bobbed like buoys on a calm sea. Eyes darted to the fence, lingering just a second too long before sliding away in feigned indifference. The fence had become the morning news, a headline that no one could ignore. Karen's house, perched at the end of the cul-de-sac like a queen on her throne, was already bustling with activity. Her front garden, perfectly manicured, was a testament to her iron grip on the neighborhood's aesthetics. She stepped out, her heels clicking against the driveway, a sound like nails on a chalkboard. Her clipboard, always close at hand, was more than just a tool. It was her scepter, her weapon of choice. From my window, I could see her pause, her eyes narrowing as they landed on my handiwork. Her lips pressed into a thin line, the color of dissatisfaction. She scribbled something furiously before marching down the street, a storm cloud on a collision course with my sunshine. Every absurd rule, every petty citation, every whispered word in hushed gatherings had led to this. I hadn't just painted a fence. I'd painted a mirror, reflecting back every tiny tyranny. The words danced in their garish colors, a patchwork quilt of superiority and oppression. The gossip began to spread, carried on the wind like autumn leaves. Whispers behind hands, laughter mingling with disbelief. The tales grew taller, each retelling a little more embellished than the last. Some said I was a hero, others a lunatic. But the truth, the real truth, lay somewhere in between. I was merely a storyteller, using my fence as parchment, my brush as a pen. The HOA meeting was set for that evening, an emergency assembly. Karen's idea, no doubt. Her chance to rally the troops, to turn public opinion against my artistic dissent. The irony, of course, was delicious. I'd followed every rule to the letter, even if they were written in technicolor for all to see. In the quiet moments as I prepared my defense, I reflected on the absurdity of it all. How had we come to this? A community divided, not by the strength of its bonds, but by the pettiness of its rules. A place where conformity was king and creativity an unwelcome guest. The day wore on, each tick of the clock bringing us closer to the inevitable reckoning. I felt a quiet resolve building within me, a calm before the storm. Whatever happened that evening, whatever judgment was passed, I had already won in a way. I'd shown them their own reflection, and now it was up to them to decide if they could live with what they saw. The sun began its descent, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. I took one last look at my painted fence, a silent sentinel in the gathering dusk, and smiled. Tonight, the curtain would rise on Act 3, and I was ready. As the sun kissed the horizon, the neighborhood settled into its evening rituals. The gentle hum of lawnmowers faded, replaced by the chirping chorus of crickets. My fence, that infamous structure of contention, stood boldly, now a canvas of communal transgressions. Each slat bore silent witness to the hypocrisies of the HOA, painted meticulously by my steady hand. It began with cautious glances from neighbors, hesitant to linger too long lest they be roped into my quiet rebellion. But curiosity is a persistent beast. One by one, they wandered by, feigning nonchalance while their eyes traced the litany of infringements I had carefully rendered. The fence was no longer an eyesore. It was a mirror, reflecting back the collective sins of the HOA. The first slat read, "Unauthorized lawn ornaments," a nod to the gaudy, oversized gnome collection Mrs. Thompson insisted was her garden's artistic centerpiece. The next, "Trash can violation," captured in vivid reds and blacks, a direct jab at Mr. Henderson's habitual laziness. Each infraction was a story, an unspoken agreement broken and then forgotten. As the days slipped by, the fence became a gathering point, the neighborhood's new attraction. People whispered behind cupped hands, or merely shook their heads, expressions caught somewhere between amusement and incredulity. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, a pot about to boil over. I watched from my porch, a silent observer in this unfolding drama. The air was thick with unspoken words and barely concealed judgments. Yet, I felt a strange calm wash over me, vindication perhaps, or the satisfaction of holding a mirror to the petty tyrannies that governed our lives. One evening, I noticed Karen standing at the edge of my lawn, arms crossed, face tight with irritation. Her presence was both expected and theatrical. She was the puppet master of this suburban stage, And yet here she was, unable to ignore the spectacle I had created. Our eyes met, a brief, wordless exchange. Her gaze was a storm of indignation, while mine was a tranquil lake. A breeze rustled the leaves, carrying with it the distant smell of rain. It was a reminder of change, of cleansing. Karen lingered for a moment longer before turning sharply, her departure as pointed as her disapproval. I watched her retreat, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. This was not over. Not by a long shot. The neighborhood's evening rhythm continued, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around them. I leaned back, savoring the taste of defiance. The fence stood as testament to my quiet rebellion, an artful chronicle of rules breached and lines crossed. It was more than wood and paint. It was a story, my story, painted boldly for all to see. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, my fence, the erstwhile eyesore, stood proud, a monument to irony and truth. The neighborhood would buzz, the HOA would rage, but in the end, I had painted more than just a fence. I had painted freedom. The sun rose reluctantly that morning, as if it too was unsure of the day's imminent unraveling. I stood by the window, the air still cool with dawn, watching my painted fence, now an intricate tapestry of every rule and regulation the HOA had ever trampled. Each stroke of paint was a story, each line a transgression laid bare. Karen's reign had lasted too long, her power fed by the silence of those who feared her clipboard and condescending gaze. But silence is a fragile fortress. It crumbles under the weight of truth. And truth, I had decided, would be my most vibrant color. By mid-morning, the neighborhood buzzed like a hive disturbed. Curious eyes peered from behind lace curtains. Whispers spread like fire through dry grass. The fence, with its chaotic symphony of hypocrisy, was impossible to ignore. Here was the evidence, bold and undeniable, of rules twisted and bent to suit Karen's whims. The irony was palpable. Her demand for aesthetic purity had birthed this revelatory canvas. People gathered, drawn by the spectacle. They read aloud the accusations etched in vivid hues. Parking infractions overlooked, unauthorized extensions blessed with blind eyes, and frivolous fines imposed on those she deemed unworthy. Each revelation was a crack in her veneer of benevolence. Karen arrived, her approach heralded by the clatter of kitten heels against concrete. Her face was a storm of emotions, confusion most palpable, as her eyes swept over the fence. The crowd parted like a sea, and she came to stand before her unintended masterpiece. The air was thick with anticipation, waiting for the tempest to unleash. But I remained silent, giving her no target, but the truth now painted for all to see. Her eyes flickered with the weight of her own contradictions. Power drained from her like water through a sieve. It was a sight both pitiful and profound. The neighborhood had never felt more alive, the people more awake. Conversations sparked, tentative at first, but gaining confidence. Voices, once muted, found strength in unity. They whispered of elections, of change, of reclaiming the community from Karen's grasp. Her citadel of unchallenged authority was crumbling, brick by brick, as people realized they had each been holding a piece of its foundation. Yet, Karen did not rage or scream. Her retreat was quiet, a surrender without ceremony. There were no grand confrontations, no theatrical breakdowns, just a quiet withdrawal. The slow ebb of influence as the neighborhood began to breathe again, free from the suffocating grasp of her petty tyranny. I watched her go, feeling neither triumph nor remorse, just a calm sense of justice finding its balance. The fence stood as a monument to resilience, a testament to what happens when silence breaks and truth finds its voice. The community began to repair not just fences or gardens, but bonds and trust, a collective effort to rebuild what had been fractured. An unspoken promise lingered in the air, to never again allow one voice to drown out all others. As the day wore on and the sun began its descent, I painted over the fence, blanketing it in a wash of serene blue. the scars of past battles sealed beneath a hopeful sky, and the neighborhood, at last, felt like home.